Small towns were once the backbone of America. Factories closed, young people left, jobs vanished. Today, we're looking at 5 states where small towns are slowly disappearing, some fighting to survive, others already on life support. I'm Mr. State. Let's rank them from best to worst.
Arkansas comes in dead last on this list, and honestly, it's not even close. This is the state where small towns don't disappear with a bang, they just stop existing, one closed business at a time. Now, Arkansas will tell you it's affordable, and yes, when houses cost less than a used pickup truck, that's technically true. But affordability doesn't matter much when there's no economy left to support it. Most of Arkansas's disappearing towns share the same story. They were built on one industry: timber, agriculture, railroads, or manufacturing, and when that industry left, nothing replaced it. No tech, no healthcare hubs, no tourism boom, just empty storefronts and for sale signs that have been sun-bleached for a decade. Towns like Helena, West Helena, Clarendon, Earl, Dermott, and Lake Village used to matter. Now, they're hanging on mostly because moving costs money, and many residents simply can't leave. Young people don't stay. They graduate high school and disappear to Little Rock, Texas, or anywhere with a future. What's left behind is an aging population, shrinking tax bases, and city budgets that barely cover road repairs, if that. Crime doesn't help either. Arkansas doesn't have big city crime levels, but many of these small towns suffer from persistent poverty-driven crime. Property crime is high, drug-related arrests are common, and law enforcement departments are often understaffed or stretched thin across entire counties. Healthcare access is another slow killer. In many rural Arkansas towns, the nearest hospital is 30 to 60 minutes away. Some local clinics have shut down entirely. If you're older or sick, that's not an inconvenience. That's a reason to leave, or a reason towns keep shrinking. Then there's infrastructure. Roads crumble. Internet speeds lag behind national averages. Cell service drops the moment you leave town limits, which isn't comforting when towns are already isolated. And yet, Arkansas leaders love to say these places are making a comeback. They aren't. Population data shows steady decline across large portions of eastern and southern Arkansas. School enrollments drop, housing stock deteriorates, businesses don't reopen once they close. This isn't revival. This is managed decline, whether anyone wants to admit it or not. Now, to be fair, Arkansas does have beautiful nature. The Ozarks are stunning. The rivers are peaceful. The scenery is doing more work than the economy ever could. But scenery doesn't pay bills, and it doesn't keep towns alive. Some people move to these towns chasing quiet living and low costs, only to realize quiet turns into isolated and cheap turns into limiting. Arkansas isn't collapsing overnight. It's fading slowly, quietly, and stubbornly. And that's why it ranks worst on this list for disappearing small towns. No reinvention, no population rebound, just places that time and opportunity forgot. I'm Mr. State, and next we'll talk about a state that's slightly better but still not doing great. Oklahoma. Small towns that are slowly disappearing. Let's talk about Oklahoma, a state that proudly calls itself flyover country and then acts shocked when people actually fly over it. Oklahoma isn't collapsing overnight. It's not dramatic, it's not loud. It's worse. It's slowly, quietly shrinking, one small town at a time. These are places that used to matter. Railroad towns, oil towns, farming hubs. Now, they're running on memories, dollar stores, and a prayer. The population problem. Oklahoma's biggest issue isn't crime. It isn't weather. It isn't even politics. It's lack of opportunity. Young people leave because there's nothing for them. Jobs are limited, wages are low, and ambition has a very low speed limit here. Small towns across Oklahoma have been losing population for decades.
Some places are down 30, 40, even 50% from their peak. When your graduating class has 12 kids and half of them already plan to leave, you don't need a crystal ball to see the future. Ghosts of the oil boom. Many of Oklahoma's small towns were built on oil money, and when the oil slowed down, so did everything. Once the rigs left, so did the jobs, then the families, then the tax base. What stayed behind? Empty storefronts, aging residents, and infrastructure from the 1950s that nobody can afford to fix. You'll see main streets where the movie theater closed in 1993. The diner closes at 2 p.m., and the biggest employer is the county courthouse. That's not growth, that's survival mode. Towns hanging on through a thread. Drive through rural Oklahoma and you'll see it everywhere. Houses with good bones but bad neglect. Schools barely staying open due to low enrollment. Hospitals turning into urgent care clinics, then closing altogether. Once a town loses its hospital or its school, it's basically game over. People don't retire there, families don't move there, and businesses definitely don't invest there. Weather, isolation, and reality. Oklahoma weather doesn't help. Tornadoes, extreme heat, ice storms. That's manageable when a town is thriving. It's not manageable when roads aren't maintained, emergency services are underfunded, and half the population is over 60. Isolation makes it worse. Some of these towns are 45 minutes from anything resembling opportunity. No Target, no Costco, no decent hospital. Just a gas station if you're lucky. The people aren't the problem. Here's the thing Mr. State will say clearly. The people in these towns aren't lazy. They're not stupid, and they're not bad. They're just stuck. Stuck in places where the economy never modernized, broadband came late, if at all, and leadership keeps promising revival that never shows up. Hard work can't fix a system that stopped working 30 years ago. So why is Oklahoma number 4 and not dead last? Because some towns are still holding on. Cost of living is low, property is cheap, and crime in many rural areas is still manageable. And for people who want quiet, land, and low expectations, Oklahoma can still work. But let's be honest, without new industry, without investment, without young people staying, many of these small towns aren't being revived. They're being preserved until they fade away. Mr. State verdict. Oklahoma's disappearing towns won't vanish tomorrow. They'll fade slowly, one family leaving at a time, one business closing at a time, one empty house at a time. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, it's just reality. And reality doesn't care about nostalgia.
Number 3, Ohio. Small towns that are quietly disappearing. Ohio is a strange place. On paper, it looks fine. Midwestern, affordable, plenty of cities. But once you leave the interstates and suburbs, a very different Ohio shows up. This is a state where small towns aren't dying suddenly, they're fading slowly, one empty storefront at a time. Ohio's population hasn't collapsed like some states, but many rural towns peaked decades ago and never recovered. Manufacturing left, young people followed, and what stayed behind aged in place. Let's talk about the Ohio no one advertises. The industrial hangover. Ohio's biggest problem is also its history. For most of the 20th century, small towns in Ohio existed for one reason: a factory, a mill, a plant, or something that involved steel, rubber, or parts made for Detroit. And when those jobs disappeared, the town didn't pivot, it just waited. Places like East Liverpool, Wellsville, Martins Ferry, Portsmouth, Ironton. These towns once supported thousands of workers. Now they support Dollar General, a gas station, and a bar that's been open since 1978. If you remove the hospital or the school, the town collapses entirely. Population loss without headlines. Ohio doesn't get dramatic headlines about population loss. Why? Because the decline is slow, boring, and relentless. Many small towns lose 0.5, 1%, 2% per year. That doesn't sound bad until you realize that's 30 to 40% over a generation. Schools consolidate, main streets hollow out, homes sit empty but still somehow aren't cheap enough to justify moving there. This is decline by paperwork, not disaster. Young people are gone, for good. Here's the real killer. Ohio's small towns are losing their future. Graduates leave for Columbus, Cleveland suburbs, Cincinnati, or other states entirely, and they don't come back. Why would they? Limited jobs, low wages, aging populations, little nightlife, and a social scene that peaks at high school football. What remains is retirees, people who couldn't leave, and families tied to property or caregiving. Once a town loses its 25 to 40 age group, the countdown starts. Opioids, poverty, and quiet desperation. Ohio has been one of the hardest hit states by the opioid crisis, and small towns took the worst of it. Economic decline, job loss, and boredom equals disaster. In many disappearing towns, you'll find high overdose rates, declining life expectancy, overburdened emergency services, churches doubling as support centers. It's not always visible, it's not chaos, it's just heavy. And outsiders feel it immediately. Why Ohio is still number 3, not worse? Because unlike Arkansas or Oklahoma, Ohio still has major cities that are growing. Logistics, healthcare, and education still provide jobs. Infrastructure is relatively strong. Some small towns are reinventing themselves as exurbs or commuter towns. Places within an hour of Columbus or Cincinnati still have hope. Ohio's small towns aren't doomed by geography, they're doomed by distance from opportunity. That's a key difference. The verdict. Ohio's disappearing towns won't vanish overnight. They'll linger, shrink, consolidate, age, and one day someone will drive through and say, "This used to be a town." Ohio is number 3 because it still has life left. But for many small towns, the best years are long gone, and unless something changes, they'll continue fading quietly.
Number 2, Iowa, the state that's quietly emptying out. Iowa doesn't collapse loudly. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't riot, burn, or implode in dramatic fashion. It just fades. This is the state people drive through, not to. And for hundreds of small towns across Iowa, that's the problem. For decades, Iowa sold itself as stable, safe, and affordable. And technically, that part is still true. But stability without opportunity is just slow decline. Most of Iowa's disappearing towns were built for one thing: agriculture. Corn, soybeans, hogs, ethanol, repeat, forever. That model worked until technology made farms bigger, faster, and less dependent on people. Today, a single operation can do what used to require an entire town's workforce. And when the jobs vanished, the people followed. The population problem no one talks about. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Iowa's population isn't collapsing overall, but its rural towns absolutely are. Young people leave for Des Moines, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, or more often, they leave the state entirely. What's left behind? Aging residents, empty schools, closed grocery stores, one remaining gas station holding the town together like duct tape. Some towns now have more cemeteries than employers. That's not a joke. That's a warning sign. Towns that are slowly disappearing. Places like Exline, Mystic, Fonda, Ledyard, Coon Rapids, the other one nobody's heard of. These towns didn't fail, they were simply no longer needed by the modern economy. Main Street are lined with boarded up storefronts, banks that closed years ago,
buildings that still advertise businesses from the 1980s. And the silence, it's loud. Why Iowa ranks number 2, not number 1? Because Iowa still has structure. The roads are maintained, the crime is low, the infrastructure mostly works. You're unlikely to be robbed, shot, or stranded, but you might be bored into existential crisis. This is a state where nothing terrible happens, but nothing happens. And for young families, creatives, entrepreneurs, or anyone under 35, that's a deal breaker. The brain drain reality. Iowa educates people very well, then watches them leave. Graduates move to Minnesota, Illinois, Colorado, Texas, anywhere with better wages and actual nightlife. The towns they leave behind don't get replacements. Immigration doesn't refill rural Iowa the way other states do, and without population turnover, towns age, shrink, and stall. The illusion of affordability. Yes, Iowa is cheap, but cheap only matters if you have income. Many of these towns offer limited job options, lower wages, few healthcare facilities, long drives for basic services. A $90,000 house isn't a bargain if there's no future attached to it. The final reality. Iowa's disappearing towns aren't dangerous, they're not chaotic, they're not even dramatic. They're just slowly being erased by time, economics, and silence. And that's why Iowa lands at number 2, because when a place fades quietly, no one notices until it's already gone.
Number 1. Indiana, the least dying of the dying. Indiana takes the top spot on this list, and let's be clear right away, that does not mean Indiana's small towns are thriving. It simply means they're not disappearing as fast as the others. In a competition where everyone is sinking, Indiana is the one still treading water. Now, small towns across Indiana have been losing people for decades. That part is not up for debate. Factory closures, farm consolidation, and younger generations fleeing to Indianapolis, Chicago, or anywhere with Wi-Fi and ambition have taken their toll. But here's the difference. Indiana's small towns aren't collapsing overnight. They're shrinking slowly, stubbornly, and with just enough economic activity to avoid total extinction. And in today's America, that's considered a win. Why Indiana is holding on. Indiana benefits from something the other 4 states on this list struggle with. Location. You're close to Chicago, you're close to Indianapolis, you're close to manufacturing corridors, logistics hubs, and actual jobs. Many small Indiana towns survive not because they're exciting, but because they're convenient. Towns like Huntington, Jasper, Peru, and Greensburg still have employers. Maybe not glamorous ones, but real ones. Distribution centers, auto suppliers, medical facilities, and food processing plants are quietly keeping paychecks flowing. These towns aren't booming, they're functioning, and that alone keeps them off life support. Population decline, slow, not sudden. While towns in Arkansas or Oklahoma are watching 20 to 30% of their population vanish in a generation, many Indiana towns are losing people at a slower, more manageable pace. A few hundred residents here, 1,000 there. It's death by paper cut, not by chainsaw. That gives Indiana's towns time to adapt. Schools consolidate instead of shutting down, main streets look tired, not abandoned, grocery stores downsize instead of disappearing completely. It's not pretty, but it's survivable. Cost of living, Indiana's secret weapon. Another reason Indiana ranks number 1, affordability without total misery. You can still buy a house in many Indiana small towns for under $150,000 and not one that's falling over. Property taxes are reasonable, utilities are manageable, gas is cheaper than the national average, and you don't need a tech salary to survive. That matters. Because while young people may not be rushing into these towns, retirees, remote workers, and blue-collar families aren't fleeing them either. Indiana isn't exciting, but it's livable. The people who stay. Small-town Indiana has a type.
People who value stability over trendiness, familiar faces over nightlife, a decent paycheck over chasing a dream. These towns still have Little League games. High school football still matters way too much. The diner still knows your order. That social glue is powerful. It's why Indiana's towns fade slowly instead of vanishing entirely. But let's not pretend it's great. Now, don't get carried away. Indiana's small towns still face serious problems: aging populations, brain drain, limited healthcare access, minimal cultural growth. If a major employer shuts down, the town is in trouble, fast, and many downtowns look like they stopped trying sometime around 1998. This is not a renaissance, it's managed decline. Why Indiana wins this list? Indiana ranks number 1 because its small towns still have jobs, infrastructure, proximity to real cities, affordable living, just enough momentum to survive. They're not disappearing, they're enduring. And in a country where rural America is vanishing at record speed, Indiana's towns are quietly saying, "Not today." They may never grow again, they may never be trendy, but among these 5 states, Indiana's small towns are the least likely to become ghost towns, and that's why Indiana is the best of the 5.
And there you have it. 5 states, hundreds of small towns, and one uncomfortable truth. These places aren't disappearing because people suddenly hate small-town life. They're disappearing because jobs left, young people followed, and investment never came back. Indiana survived because it adapted. Iowa hangs on because it still feeds the country. Ohio is fighting nostalgia with logistics and hospitals. Oklahoma keeps swinging between opportunity and chaos. And Arkansas, well, Arkansas is still waiting for someone to show up. Small towns don't die overnight. They fade, one closed factory at a time, one graduating class that never comes back, one for sale sign that never gets taken down. Some of these places still have a future. Others are already living in the past. And if you're thinking about moving, retiring, or escaping the city, remember this: cheap doesn't always mean sustainable. I'm Sir State. If you enjoyed the truth, hit subscribe. If you didn't, the statistics still stand. See you next week.